Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final session. Hello, hello. We're not going to start till 2:15, but wanted to let you all in the room. I'm going to spotlight all of our presenters. Hello, Christine. Cool. Welcome. As you come in, we will start in about 3 minutes. This is the closing session, which is support during book challenges. We'll start right on time because I have some intro stuff to say, and I want to give our panelists as much time as possible to talk, because we could probably take more than an hour easily. If you've been at other sessions today, you know that if you are named something that is not your name, we may private message you and ask you what your name is, so we can change your name and give you credit for being here for clock hours. That's how we're taking attendance, is Zoom participant list. As people are trickling in, I'm actually going to put a link to the evaluation in the chat, because this is our last session of the day. If you would be so kind as to fill that out at the end of this session, or at your convenience when you can, when you are done watching the recordings, or if you're all done after today, it's immensely helpful. And we'll get started in about a minute. All right, it is officially 2:15, so I'm going to go ahead and get started, especially because I have some housekeeping stuff I have to talk about before we start. You are in today's closing session. It is support during book challenges during our school library in-service training day, and this is the final session for the day. Before I turn it over to our panel, I have some final housekeeping stuff to go through. As usual, live transcription is enabled for this session, so if you would like to take advantage of that, you can click the CC button at the bottom and the little caret if you need to change any of the sessions, any of the options. And again, I am Sarah White, the Youth Services Consultant with the Washington State Library. My contact info is on this slide. Feel free to email me any questions or comments about this program, or if you have any need to get a hold of me. I love to chat with librarians. And then on the right, I just want to thank one more time the amazing colleagues I have who have helped me put on and run this day. So I don't know if there's like an applause emoji, but thank you so much, Tammy and Sarah and Leslie and Meredith. It's been really great having you help run the rooms, and they will continue to watch chat and Q&A during this panel. So if you need to get a hold of someone for any reason, those are the folks to talk to. Since this is our last session, I want to close with another land acknowledgement. The Washington State Library is located in Tumwater, Washington, which is the traditional lands of the Coast Salish people. We acknowledge their presence here since time immemorial and recognize their continuing connection to the land, to the water, and to their ancestors. We acknowledge, support, and recognize their continuing connection to the land, water, and ancestors, and strive to learn from and support the Indigenous people of Washington as an integral part of our mission as the Washington State Library. We only have a short time always to do these acknowledgements at the beginning of our sessions, and we're always striving to make it better. So if you have any suggestions on ways we can do that, we would love to hear from you. We totally consent to any feedback. This day of sessions and panels has been brought to you by the Washington State Library, which is part of the Office of the Secretary of State, and our funder is the Institute of Museum and Library Services through the LSTA Act. And as a requirement of our funding and as a requirement for clock hours, we will be asking you to take an evaluation survey. I will email it out. It's also in the Niche Academy page linked, and I will put it in the chat as well. Please make sure that you fill out this survey. It really helps continue our funding and bring more amazing opportunities like this one to you and to other folks in Washington. Lastly, we might message you and ask you to sign into Zoom with your real full name. So we might ask you your name and rename you if you haven't done that, just so that we get an accurate attendance list, so you get clock hours credit. Once you are done watching all of the live sessions today and any of the ones that we recorded, like if there was another session happening at the same time and you want to go to that one, and you want to watch the recording, email us after you've done everything involving this training day at this email address and let us know, and that's when we'll send you your 1125 form for clock hours, because we don't want to send you two. We want one for everything. We are in webinar mode, but chat and Q&A is enabled. Feel free to use both of those things, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat and Q&A. We do suspect that we are going to have a lot to talk about in this panel, and we might not get to all the questions. I will be recording all of the questions, and I will email anything that doesn't get addressed to the panel and have them try to answer by typing it, and I'll post it in Niche Academy. So if your question doesn't get answered, do not fear. We will try to answer it later. Again, live transcription is enabled. Click the CC button, and you can feel free to message me, Sarah Pate, Tammy Masenheimer, Leslie James, or Meredith Hale if you need assistance. And now I'm going to stop talking. Well, I'm going to be facilitating this panel, so you don't get to hear me stop talking yet. But I'm very excited to welcome our panel, Gavin, Scott, Christine, and Kelly, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves actually. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and make sure that we're recording. Yes. And there's Michelle. I'm going to add a spotlight. There we go. Okay. So the first question I have for all of you is, who are you? What do you do? Where do you work? And we're going to talk about a very specific book challenge today. So I kind of want us as a group collectively to tell the story of what happened. We have about 10 minutes to do this. And I'm going to start with Gavin, because I'm going to have him tell like the core of the story. And then I want each of you to sort of tell your piece of it from your perspective. So Gavin, go for it. Take it away.
So I'm Gavin Downing. At the time of the challenge, I was a librarian at Cedar Heights Middle School School District. And I brought some LGBT-focused books into the library last school year. And about December, my principal came into the library carrying one of them, was very upset about the book, felt it was inappropriate. When I tried to tell her, that's fine, there's a process if you feel this is inappropriate, she told me she didn't have to follow that. She's the principal. And so from there, it kind of escalated. She started trying to pull more books. She tried to reach out to other principals to tell them to pull books. So with Kelly's help and a few other people, I went public about this. I blew the whistle on it. The story changed at that point. It suddenly became, there's a student who's complaining about this book and the principal's just facilitating it. Despite that not being in any of the emails. It was eventually decided by the district that the process had not been followed. And so it was starting over with a new person who challenged within 30 minutes of that decision being made. Yes, this was in Kent School District, just outside of Seattle. And the new challenger was someone who knew my principal and had no students at the school. But the process eventually before the school board, it was closer than it should have been, but eventually the school board made the right call, in my opinion, and chose not to ban this book or the other books that the principal was trying to pull as well. So that's the super condensed version of what I went through, and I had a lot of help from more people than just here, but these people who I've invited here were one of the people who were very, very important on supporting me. And I am fine. The principal is still at Cedar Heights. I did find it to become kind of a toxic working environment, so I transferred to another school in the same district at the high school level. The first book that was an issue was Jack of Hearts and Other Parts, and that was the one that the new person also challenged. That's by Elsie Rosen. The book is about a sexually active teen. There are no sex scenes in the book, but he's persuaded, he's gay, and he, thank you, Michelle, those are the other books that were also targeted. He is persuaded to write a sex advice column for his peers and gets a stalker. And most of the plot is about him trying to figure out who that stalker is. It's sort of a mystery. But there's actual sex advice in there. The author got actual questions from teens, and then got, when he wrote the answers, he had sex educators helping write those answers. So it's all medically accurate. It's all really good information for people who are maybe going that direction or having questions about that. So that was the first book. The other books, If I Was Your Girl by Meredith Russo, is about a trans girl who moves to a new school. No one knows she's trans there, and starts developing a relationship with a popular boy at that school. And lastly, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson. And that's a memoir about growing up Black and queer. And he also calls it a memoir manifesto because he believes that there are things in there about what we can do to improve the lives of people along those lines. So those are the books. These are some of the core people who helped me. Let me pass it on to others. I'm actually going to start with my wife, M. Downing. So if you want to explain your real quick what was going on with you.
Yep, my apologies. A bit of computer issues. Anyway, my name is Michelle M. Downing, and I use she, they pronouns. And what my perspective is I'm a licensed librarian in the state of Washington. I currently work in something of a teaching coaching position within equity education. And well, my husband and I we were kind of prepared. The reason why we were able to fight this is because we were prepared. Like on dates, we'd constantly talk about when the book challenge comes, because we kind of had it in the back of our heads that it was going to happen, especially if we did the librarianship work that we needed to correctly. If we were including queer voices, if we were including Black and brown voices. And as we've seen, these challenges are coming up a lot more, both externally and internally. After this, I'm going to turn it over to Scott Quinn, because he was definitely one of the internal folks doing a lot of legwork, and I thank him for it. I thank all the panelists for what they did.
My name is Scott Quinn. I am a teacher librarian and technology integration specialist at Meeker, which is another one of the middle schools in the Kent School District. Middle school librarians, we really gelled during the COVID year. We started meeting regularly with each other and discussing things and sharing books and ideas, which was really strengthened, I think, all of our programs. Wouldn't you say, Gavin? But earlier last year, Gavin was sharing some of the books that he was putting into the library and why. And yeah, at the time, yeah, we knew that Jack of Hearts and Other Parts was edgy, but Gavin did a whole lot of legwork and research and justifying why it would be a strong addition to the collection for underserved group. And I was, not all of the middle schools got it, but I was one of the other ones that did. We did not have a challenge in my school, but I tried to support Gavin. The first I heard about it was when Gavin emailed and said, something's coming down the pike, you're going to probably be hearing about it, the same day that his principal emailed all the other principals in a tizzy about these terrible books that we have. Let's see what else. Following that, I was just seeking to support Gavin professionally and personally. Helped him do some of the legwork. We did I would consider it fairly extensive review of literature to counter the claims of harming children coming from the other side, and to furthermore show due diligence that we are not harming children. And also to just help field the interactions with other people. Gavin got significant personal attacks, and as I was one step outside of that, I could engage professionally with a number of the people with I'm not sure quite what euphemism to use, extreme unwarranted concerns perhaps. And that way give Gavin a break and have a new voice. And I think I've answered most of the questions. Christy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christy, and my role in the Kent School District, I'm a former Teachers Union president for the Kent School District, and now I work for the Washington Education Association as the UNISERV director assigned to Kent. And so my role regarding the book challenge was a little different than everyone else on the panel. Gavin contacted me early in the process when his principal called him to the office to challenge his authority on which books to order for the library. And so our school district has a clear policy for when a book is challenged, and the principal, by single-handedly going into the library and pulling books off the library shelves, broke that policy. So my job became challenging the district's challenge according to board policy and the contract. So I filed grievances on Gavin's behalf. About a week before it was going to arbitration, the district settled and agreed to not ban the books from the Cedar Heights Library, but that's where we were headed. The other role was to make sure that Gavin had a safe working environment, as there was very overt retaliation by the administration in our district as well as some privacy issues that were violated regarding Gavin's personal information. So that was kind of my role in this situation.
I think I'm the last one, like way outside of what all of y'all did. My name is Kelly Jensen, and I am an editor at Book Riot. And I've been covering censorship stories for about a decade now. Prior to working for Book Riot, I worked in public libraries as a librarian and have just made a real effort to cover issues related to libraries. And so my role in the story is that when Gavin was ready to blow the whistle and share what was going on, I worked with him to write a story and publish it at Book Riot to really not just talk about what happened, that the books were pulled, but really look at all the different pieces that went into this and try to clarify that this was coming from administration within the school, and that all of the steps along the way just did not follow policy and were also clear violation of student rights to access these books.
Thank you, everyone. And we're going to dig a little bit more into different parts of the challenge. We're basically going to go through it chronologically. And I wanted to start, and I think you guys are pretty good at steering who talks. So I'm going to let you pipe in unless you want me to call on you. But the first question is just, before a challenge happens, what do you do to be ready? What did you do? What do you wish you had done?
So the first thing is making sure that mindset is in place. Em spoke a little bit about how, we talked about that regularly, about what we would do about, challenges possibly coming up. If you are doing your work as a librarian well and serving the communities you need to serve, a challenge is maybe not inevitable, but it's going to be a part of the process of what you do as a librarian. And so just be ready for that. So when it comes, you don't panic. You're like, okay, no, I have a plan. I'm ready to go. I'm my steps. So just having that mindset, challenges are going to happen. Okay. I also really encourage everyone to look at what their district's policies are. I did not ahead of time. I vaguely, I knew there was a process, but I didn't know what it was until it happened, and I really should have taken those steps. I really know them now. The other thing as well is, and this was one that I didn't do, and I have done now at my new school, is talk to your administration. The administration of the school district doesn't know the role of the library. They often don't understand what we do. They don't understand our purpose, our role. It's just a place for books, right? There's so much more than that. And to champion intellectual freedom and all the other different parts that we have, taking a moment to talk with your principal and say, look, I want you to know these are the things. And if a challenge comes up, be aware, this is the process, here's how it will be handled. And making sure that they know so they're not caught flat-footed, and make them an ally. Or if they're not going to be an ally, be aware ahead of time. So those would be my steps that I would encourage. Oh, and if your policies are weak, find ways to strengthen them.
I'm going to add to that. The districts have had some issues because they think, and Kent also tried to pull this stuff, where they put instructional materials under the same branch as library materials, and they are not the same. And so making sure that that particular policy is clarified in advance is definitely one of those things that'll save you a lot of time and headache. The other thing that I can tell you as somebody from outside organizations, there are a lot of people willing to help you with this. I work for an unapologetically Black empowerment organization. And I was in a position, and I'm still somewhat in a position of telling my organization what libraries do in schools, that they're not just, like the people who fix the tech and store books. There's a lot of things where there's just not that information from potential allies as to what they can do and how they can help you. So they're willing to like spread your message through Twitter. They're willing to come down to your school and talk to them. But there are other ways that we found that were small, tiny ways to support Gavin and myself during this time as a family, that were just like, hey, just listen to us vent or get us some food or something, because those little things also matter, and those things come from a community.
I just want to elaborate on what Gavin had to say about knowing your policy. I think that it's easy to forget that those policies are living documents, so you should revisit them all the time. Make sure it's in place, make sure things haven't changed, make sure that if there are things you want to change, that gets in there. I know a lot of policies are based off ALA's boilerplate template, which is a great place to start. But we're in such a censorship culture now that it's worth looking at and seeing if you can find places to add more to that. Encourage people who are going to challenge to talk about what values they see in the book, like the good things they see right alongside the bad things. And to further something Gavin had said earlier too, have them provide their sources where they're finding this information. It's helpful for you to kind of get ahead and know what resources they're using, both so that you can discredit it, but also because you might see it come up again and again and again, and that gives you a really good background knowledge in where some of these challenges might be coming from. And then one additional thing, ALA suggests that you don't reach out to the media when you are dealing with this. And I'm of two minds about this. One, I think it's good advice if you're not prepared for what could happen. But two, reaching out to media that you trust, and your level of trust is going to be different depending what community you're in. You might have a great local news source who you can reach out to. You might need to do something different than your local news. Just make sure that whoever you're working with respects what could happen if your name gets out there and is attached to it, and ensure either that you're prepared for it, or maybe you can talk off record just to get the word out there, because you will find your supporters this way, and a lot of writers will also have connections who can help build support.
Yeah. I would like to second a whole lot of what Gavin was saying, especially with the policies. You also have to not think straightforwardly. Kent had one policy that was very clearly under the heading of library that was significantly different from policy for instructional materials. And after this challenge happened, they suddenly decided that that particular policy, which was called 2021, was completely irrelevant, and the instructional materials policy was the one that they were going to use. So that changed things up sort of middle of the road. So yeah, you've got to not take the most obvious. Again, yes, plan to expect these. And the other thing, I had been sort of planning for them around some books even before this one. All the ones I'd had before had been settled amicably, just in discussions with the person of concern. Now you've got a plan for a whole lot of nasty and a whole lot of intellectual dishonesty. They will not. A group of people will not listen to your evidence and your proof, even if it is obvious. They have their own ideas, and that's the only thing that is. Let's see. Admin, definitely. That's one benefit that came out of this when Gavin's principal hit the roof. I guess she was slightly incoherent in her emails to the other principals, because mine actually started the dialogue and said, "I got this email, what is this about?" And it allowed us to open dialogue rather than having it already solidified in positions, which wound up being a good thing. The one thing I would like to add to Gavin that I have been doing, and I'm glad I've been doing it and I will continue doing it, is I actually start a dialogue with the students at the beginning of the year on book choice and responsibility. I in my library, I sort of pin it around the tagline, "You have the right and the responsibility to choose the books that are right for you." And every couple of years, I get a class to stand with a whole bunch of books that they choose and do a new poster of that. So I start off with that. I explain that they are the only ones who can decide if a book's right for them. Nobody in this library is going to tell them, no, you can't read that. Nobody's going to tell them you have to read that. I pulled it up from when I was in elementary. It's called iPick, but I shortened that to just pick. It's from the Daily Five, which was big probably 8 to 10 years ago. So students ask themselves, purpose, why am I reading? Interest, am I interested in this? Comprehension, do I understand what's going on? And K, do I know most of all the words? And I emphasize, if you decide a book is not right for you, you do not have to read it. Please bring it back. I have 10,000 books in the collection. We will get one that's right for you. Because as librarians, where we have to fight against a lot of stuff from teachers, we're winning. Many of us no longer have to do the whole graphic novels are books thing anymore. So, but one thing that is still up there, some teachers are saying, if you select a book, you have to finish it. And I really want to emphasize to students at the start that no, that is not the case. Not only does it mean that if they decide a book is not for them and it's distressing, that I don't want them to feel they have to read that. It also lowers the risk of trying something new. If I feel, oh, my teacher says I have to read this, I don't know if I want to try this new book. But if, oh, I can send that back, then it's much less of a risk for them. And I think that is just most of my notes.
Thanks so much, Scott. Christy, is there anything from a union perspective you would do before?
Well, again, just be really familiar with your policies. And if there's not a very clear policy, we need to look at that and make it very clear, because when you leave it up for interpretation, people will make it fit their scenario. And Kelly mentioned about talking with media. People will call a TV station and they tend to sensationalize things so that people will watch it. And that's something that we really don't want and can avoid. Those of you who are WA members, the first thing I did was contact WA, and they contacted Gavin and talked to him about the messaging around that it's not necessarily the book, it's about following policies and the right to choose a book or not. And in addition, like I said, we don't want this played out in the media. So WA also helped him with talking points, and they can also give you information on education friendly reporters and ones that are not. So make sure that you reach out to your union, because they have access to those resources as well.
Thank you all. I feel like we've gotten into this a little bit. Go ahead, Scott.
Could I add one more thing that I've I forgot. It's for your, when you select a book, make sure that you can explain why. It's, Gavin and I, we were both able to go in and say, yes, we know what's in this book, but we also know boom, 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 and that's why it's in the library. Didn't work with the challengers and their friends because they weren't listening, but it did work with a bunch of other people.
So we've gotten into this a little bit already, but so we've been talking a little bit about like before this even happens, but what are some of the first things you should do the moment a challenge comes in?
Talk to your union. Talk to your union. And that was the very first thing that I did. Was KSD is big enough that there's actually library reps. And so I reached out to my library rep and said, hey, this is happening the first day. And when it got worse the next day, over that weekend, I reached out to actual union leadership, and Christy was a part of that. Excuse me. And so that was one of the first things I did. We did try to solve it without bringing in the media at first. We tried to, and the district was not interested. They were just, no, the principal can do what they want. It's their building. They can get away with whatever they want in their building. And they can ignore policy if they want. It's basically the message that the district was giving. And that's when we, Christy and I decided, let's go ahead and blow the whistle on this. And I found Kelly Jensen through one of my librarian friends who said, hey, if you might try talking to, I don't even think it was Book Riot at first. There was some other group that he recommended, that one of my friends recommended, and they said, you should talk to Kelly, and put me in contact with Kelly. And so it's, it's networking is a big part of it. But knowing, that going public was not our first choice. And we wanted to try to solve it quietly because no one wants things to explode like that. But I basically had the choice between letting this censorship happen or blowing the whistle. And that's not really a choice as far as I'm concerned. I made sure my family knew that M was there to support me in so many ways, not just by listening to me and helping me talk through things, but making sure that dinner was handled on days where I was supposed to be cooking. She took care of it. Making sure, chores were getting done around the house so I didn't have to worry about that and I could focus on other things. That's huge. Having your family's buy-in is really important as well. So those, it does, when it really blows up like that, it really does consume your life. That was 6 months of my life. That was the book challenge and almost nothing else in my life. And so that's a key piece, is making sure you have your allies and knowing who to reach out to. I did reach out to the Washington Library Association, and they were huge support. I did reach out to the Intellectual Freedom Division of ALA. They gave me some good talking points. They didn't really follow up beyond that. They just had that, some initial good talking points that were very helpful off the bat. And, just starting to build your allies, finding the people that can back you. I got a lot of really great, some great friends that that basically are community activists who heard and found out and would come to help. So those were my steps.
So I'm going to make a note about that, is the small organizations, like if you find a local queer group in your area and you have a queer book challenge, the smaller groups can act faster and more locally, but they don't necessarily punch as hard. It's just a matter of size. Those big organizations like the ALA, the ACLU, reach out to them, but they're going to take their time. Now, when the ACLU letter came in, it was like lightning bolt from God time, but it took months to get that. And in the meantime, the smaller activists were so much help and so much support, and they networked like crazy for us. So you need both levels at work.
A few things I would suggest. So these are like two camps of things. Is the first is to make sure that you pause and take a breath. Don't let a sense of urgency make you think that you have to respond to something right away. That's not true. And that is too often where I see librarians practice their own self-censorship, is this fear that comes up, and it's real. I think 99% of the time, librarians who act in this way do so out of fear, not because they're trying to do anything bad or awful. And I think just remembering to like pause, to reach out to your connections, to do the things that you can before you respond, I think are going to help you resist doing that. And then the second camp of things is more in the making sure that you know what information about you is available to people. Google yourself and do a real good privacy check to make sure that information that you would not want posted on a billboard is not accessible. I know sometimes it's harder when you're in a public position. Some stuff is just going to be available. Know that and be prepared to, possibly have the worst happen. And on that same note, know that anything you share through your public email is accessible. And a lot of these individuals who come from outside of the system know this and have been taking advantage of it. So even if it's something good, I always say, let's say, for example, you're not dealing with a challenge, but you got a grant and you are buying queer books and you're very excited about this and you share that in your email. Somebody could take that FOIA and misrepresent all that it means and call you any number of names, and that could lead to a series of challenges. So just be conscious that what you do put down in your work emails, if you're in a public library or public school rather, anybody can access that.
I would add, reach out to your coworkers, and if you are a coworker, reach out as soon as you hear a challenge that has happened. Gavin, M was a great support for Gavin because, as I understand it, the personal attacks were the opening volley in this. It wasn't, what we imagine, the professional, Mr. Downing, there's someone who has a concern with this book. Maybe we can talk about it. No. Right, Gavin? She came in yelling, didn't she?
She was very upset. That first meeting, she was on the verge of yelling and in tears the whole time. She called the book exposure and said that I was basically exposing children to these terrible things. And it escalated from there. And we know from some of the activists that I made contact with in all of this, some of them have done their own public records requests about events of all of this. And for example, that my principal was saying things about my character to other people, and including to administrators at the district level and so on. And yes, that did indeed lead to I got a phone call threat that mentioned my wife by name. And yeah, so it was an interesting time.
I feel like we've moved a little bit into the next section, so I'm going to move us there anyway. But before we do that, I want to mention a few things that we talked about in our meeting about this that haven't been mentioned yet, which is that creating a link tree was really helpful for you.
Thank you.
Gavin,
Yes.
To gather stuff, and then also like taking a lot of notes, like writing down everything, going into recording mode, and then
I took daily notes.
Yeah.
I still have a Google document that has like, okay, this date, here's what happened, and here are the events that occurred. And even if it was minor, if I had an interaction with my principal, I noted that and on what day it happened and whether it was just something minor that nothing really happened about. And yeah. And the link tree helps you keep everything in one location. So having a link tree that has like, if there are news articles, you've got those. If there are, we had news articles, we had, you know, podcasts that I was interviewed for, those are all in one place.
So I'm going to move us to what we called in our planning session, like the messy middle, like, while you're like in the thick of it, that 6 months of intensity, what does that look like? What does that look like as a supporter? What does it look like from the media? I also at this point would really love to hear kind of the role of social media. Yeah.
So I will tell you, it was not pleasant. The school was very hostile. I did have friendly teachers and none of them were nearby me. And so, you know, I had right outside the library, there's the office with the administration and the office staff, most of whom were being very mean and nasty to me. Out the back door, there was another librarian, or not, another teacher rather, who initially said she was absolutely friendly and had my back. And then I found out later took excerpts of the book designed to inflame people and read it at a department meeting to get people upset. So that was on either side. I literally spent most of my time, as much as I could, in my office, just so I wouldn't. I mean, I was out there for the students when they were there, and the rest of the time, I was hiding in my office and doing as much of my work as I could from there. I blew through all of my sick time that I'd managed to accrue over 4 years. Because there would be days where I wouldn't sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night, stressed out, and could not get back to sleep. So I'm not, you know, I want to make this very clear. This is not a pleasant experience by any means, but it is also something that I would do again. And I think we'll eventually come to the aftermath, but I would do it again, and I might end up doing it again because I'm always going to get those books that someone is going to be upset about because our students need those books. Now, that said, the support of the people here absolutely kept me going. Absolutely kept me going. And so having that support network that holds you up, that can hear you when you're stressed out and just let you vent. Christy made sure that I still had a job, you know, was making sure that you know, I was protected by my union when my principal was gunning for me. And so I thank her for that. Kelly's article was retweeted by Neil Gaiman. And let me tell you, that got a lot of attention. And so that happened as well. And Scott helping professionally. And I mean, I chose the people who were here for a reason. They were all incredibly helpful and keeping me going on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, sort of, I mean, this is sort of related. I wound up doing a lot of the social media countering and explanation, which I hope is useful to you, Gavin. Again, I was familiar with what was going on, but one step removed. I still have no idea why I didn't get any of the personal, or very many of the personal attacks or any of the death threats. But I did it, and that allowed me to address it without it further making Gavin's life miserable, which if you've got somebody like that who can help, that would be a good thing.
one of the weirdest little support things that we ended up getting during all of this was one of the local massage places heard about us, and they would just call us and go, well, we have an unexpected opening. Would you like to come by? It was just that kind of thing. And they wanted to hear about it because they had a lot of queer staff. And so it was affecting them personally, but they didn't feel like they could do anything, but just that little bit. So these local businesses, if there is a way to kind of let them know that there's a way to support you, that was really nice. And it definitely boosted our morale.
And I'll say from the other side of things, you know, when you're in the thick of it, like you don't necessarily see the ripple effects of it. But I can say, you know, without question, this experience has been so valuable to share with other librarians who are experiencing something similar and say, you know, like, you never want this to happen. You never want this to happen. You don't want anybody to experience this. But, you know, the way Gavin stood up for this and did this work and had this team of support around him, like really made it the ideal situation. Like, again, you don't want to be in it, but like when you have all those pieces together, you are able to do your job when this situation comes up. So, you know, looking for people like Gavin who have stood up and done this work and asking them like what helped, you know, what do you wish you would have done? Sessions like this really do help when you're in the thick of it, remembering other people have been there, and other people have that knowledge. You know, like I get to share this story quite a bit with other librarians who are looking for examples. And there was one point during this, Gavin had sent it was like 30-page document of all the reasons like why Deck of Hearts needed to belong in the library. And it countered literally every argument that was made against this book. And I've shared that far and wide and said, like, this is such a cool way to not just respond, but to prepare. Like if you are buying a book for your library that you think could be challenged, look at this document, make something like this in advance, then you have it. And then also share it, because why reinvent the wheel as well? You know, if you can share it and make another librarian's life just a little bit easier, like what a tremendous resource to use your colleagues like that.
And for the record, that 20-page document, that was my official response to the challenge. And as far as I am concerned, anyone who's facing a book challenge can pirate as much of that as they can use. I want it to be useful, a tool for other people. I managed to get it done in the space of 4 days because that's all the principal gave me to do. And she sprung that on me 3 days in that, oh, by the way, it needs to be done tomorrow at the end of the school day. And I have citations and I found out what they were quoting for their argument of what scientific study they were using. And I pointed out, oh, by the way, that wasn't about books. It was about pornographic videos. So that's a very different thing. And so I cited all of these things. Scott helped me quite a bit. That was where having other librarians was helpful, of going, hey, I need you to look up this portion, see what you can find, get back to me. And that was tremendously helpful. We librarians know where to find stuff, and you have allies who can help you. I will tell you, if you are facing a book challenge, I am an ally. You are welcome to reach out to me. I will help you however I can. So that is absolutely there. That is an open invitation. My email, my personal email, I will put out there for people. It's my name @gmail.com with a dot between the first and last name. So yeah.
And also, yeah, all our stuff had full citations. Don't expect that from your challengers. The one he was talking about, we had to find based on, I kid you not, an article in Psychology Today says, tribute to librarians, we were able to.
Before we move on to the final topic, does anyone have any other tidbits about that messy middle? Christy, I know you haven't had a chance to talk at all about this topic yet.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add, but again, just reach out to, if you have any questions. Like Gavin, I am very honored that he chose to trust me, and you can trust people to keep things confidential and look in your best interest, because again, we have access to the WA legal team. We have access to resources. We even have access to our government officials. We went to Olympia during the while Gavin and my colleagues were fighting the good fight here. We had legislators asking us, can you help us write legislation? Can you help, how can we help support you as well? So all those outside resources that you might not have access to right away, we certainly do. So
One other thing, just personally, it really helped to just take a step back and think about why I was doing this and who I was doing it for, because especially in this situation, the kind of fill in the blank that we were getting is what LGBTQ students get all the time for just existing.
And I think that's a really great segue into our last question, which is sort of like, now that it's over, I mean, it's never over, right? But this particular instance is over. How do you continue on in your work? Like, looking forward and thinking this could happen again, how do you move forward? And also just generally, what did you learn from going through this?
So first of all, I do want to say why this was all worth it. There was one moment that happened that I was almost in tears when it happened at work. It was June. It was Pride Month. I had just found out I was going to be able to move to another school in the new school year. And one young man who always very quiet in the library came up to me. No one else was around, and he said to me, "Mr. Downing, I just wanted to thank you for always having such great library books in the library." And he just an emphasis, just enough. And then he looked around, made sure no one was looking. He raised a fist and he said, "Happy Pride." And he walked away. And in that moment, that's when I knew that everything I did was absolutely worth it, because that young man felt safe enough in that space, in that moment, to be honest about who he was. And I will go through all of that a million times if it will help those students who need it, period. And this is also why the thing to keep in mind, this is organized. This is an organized attack. They look grassroots, and in this case, this was sort of spillover. I don't think my principal was a part of that, but we know she was reading news articles from some of those organizations that are pushing this, and this is an organized effort to censor books, okay, and to attack public education. And it is meant to wear us down. Now, it is critical, it is absolutely critical that we cannot self-censor. We cannot look at a book and go, this would be great for the library, but I know it's going to cause problems, so I'm not going to get it. You cannot do that. Our kids deserve more than that. And Instead, look at it and go, this is going to get some attention. I better be ready. And that's what this is for. This is so that you can be ready. If you need to reach out to me, please do. I mean, I am in this fight now. At this point, this has awakened something in me. I want to make sure that we are fighting back, you know, organizing the way that that our opponents are organized. So yes, it's designed to get us tired and worn down. And if you need to take a moment to catch your breath, do it, but don't let it affect what you get for your collection.
And it can be hard. It can be easy, even if you are committed to freedom. It can be really easy to say, I just want a year off. But that's still censorship. If you're not putting something in the collection, you should to just have a little time off, even if you will in the future. And I have caught myself. Gavin actually caught me doing that once this year.
I think continuing to have conversations about what is happening is important. But I also think, to echo what Gavin says, talking about that quiet, that self-censorship that is so easy to want to participate in, it doesn't make you a bad person. Like, I don't think anybody would ever say, like, there's any reason why it doesn't seem appealing. But if you find yourself in that situation, that's where you pause and you say, okay, how can I prepare instead of be fearful about this? That's when you sit down and you look up those reviews and you paste them all into a document. That's where you look up the research, you put it in a document, and then you buy that book, or you keep that book on your shelf and you keep fighting. You're librarians, you know the research is out there, and you know the good research that's out there, not just the research coming from the other side. Use that as your tool. That's your job. That's what you're trained to do. And, you know, it's on your side.
I think the one thing that I learned from this was, well, number one, it's good. You need to know who your friends are and who your friends aren't. And you kind of know that going in, and then it hits you, and then you realize just how important that is. But the other thing that surprised me, not a lot did, honestly, because I do this work, but the cost actually was really kind of interesting. If you have a librarian who's facing this book challenge, seriously, send them some gift cards, because those meetings and such, they take up time. And that is time away from self-care. It's time away from even just basic functioning, like cooking meals. So there was a cost to this of almost like having a second full-time job for my husband and a second part-time job for myself in supporting him. So if you have that librarian that needed, that is getting that kind of hell, seriously, send them some help in some way. Again, even if it's a casserole, it's enough.
I'll even go as far as to say, like, just my experiences as a citizen, seeing what's going on local to me, which is not Washington State, sending an email to the librarians and saying, you're doing good work, keep it up. Like, just getting a response that said, thank you for noticing, like, that can make a huge difference. I mean,
That was huge. That was huge for me.
Yeah.
The emails that I received in support, because I got plenty of emails that weren't.
And if you live in the district that this is going on, emails to the school or letters to school, phone calls to the school board, they listen to their constituents. They don't really care as much.
Meetings. Show up to board meetings, and also show up to board meetings. Because if you're not, the opponents are.
And they are speaking for you. That needs to be emphasized, is they are speaking on behalf of everybody, when you are not the person who is there saying, wait a minute, you don't speak for me. And it can be as simple as, you know, I love the books that are in the library. Our librarian's doing a great job having a wide ranging collection in the library. That's all you have to say. Use your time that's given to you to speak well for the people who are doing this hard work.
How are we on time, Sarah? Are we done?
We are sadly a little bit over, so we need to wrap up. Does anyone have anything final that we want to say before we let people go on? Thank you so much, all of you. This is really, really valuable. It is recorded, so feel free to share it. And I will try to gather some of the documents that Gavin's talking about and put them on the Niche Academy so you have access to them. And the
I'll
chat
send
and
you
all
the
of
link
that.
tree. You'll have everything.
That's right. That'd be great. I could post the link tree on the Niche Academy. That's why you made one.
Gavin, do you have the ones that I sent to be enclosed as well?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't update the link tree. The link tree was being handled
Okay.
by one of the community organizers, and she was just
Okay.
handling all of that. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
I can.
Go ahead.
Oh, I can send mine then to Sarah. We were kind of working together enough to where mine turned into sort of a TLDR or abstract of Gavin's, but
I do know one of Kelly's articles does have a link to that 20-page document, as well as the challenge that I was responding to. The only thing that I would really close with, other than thanking everyone for being here, I really, really want to give my deepest thanks to the people who supported me, especially the people here. Yeah, I would not have made it without these people helping and supporting. I would have fought it, but I would not have been successful. I would not have been successful without the help of Em and Christy and Kelly and Scott and everyone else. So thank you.
And
Thank you.
you know, I guess the one last thing would be for me is we're winning. I mean, it doesn't feel like it right now, but the reason why we're having these challenges is because we're now having BIPOC voices, we're now having queer voices, and we're having them in much greater numbers in the library than we ever have before. And people being able to speak their truth. So we got to keep that momentum going, and we're hitting a speed bump, but we're going to get through it.
Thank you all so much. And thanks to everyone for attending today. It's been really awesome. I'm excited to go back and watch the recordings of the things I missed. And I put a link to our evaluation in the chat. I'll also email it to all of you. All feedback is welcome. And thank you so much to this panel. It's been really valuable listening to you all speak. And I hope you all have a great weekend.